Hi there! Welcome to Chapter 2 of my ongoing series covering all the music in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Yes, all the music. At the end of Chapter 1, I mentioned feeling overwhelmed and unsure about how to proceed going forward. I pitched a couple ideas, such as just doing briefer highlights-only style videos, or just limiting myself to 1 or 2 videos per chapter. But after taking in all the feedback on my Part 5 video, I have decided to, essentially change nothing and just stay the course. This format is easy enough to produce and the reception has been great, so for now, that's the plan. Besides, Chapter 2 can't possibly have more tracks than Chapter 1, right? Right? It can't possibly have 50 tracks. Surely not. Alright, before I jump into things, there are 2 things I want to follow up on. Number 1, I highlighted a specific melody line in a couple Sephiroth tracks that I couldn't put my finger on. I posited that this might be the start of New Sephiroth or Jenova leitmotif, whose exact purpose was as of now unclear to me. But the user MattMakerMusic9743 pointed out that this is more likely the choir from the penultimate passage of One Winged Angel. That's much better than what I said. Thank you, Matt. Second of all, the last shot that I showed you in the preceding episode was that wonderful camera pullout of the ruins of Midgar and Shinra HQ during the game's earlier interlude sequence. I love that scene, and especially that piece of music that plays right there. As the camera fades to black, I noticed something in the audio mix that had eluded me so far. Did you hear those bells? What was that? 5 notes, clearly deliberate, but what exactly it means I am not sure. Maybe when we get around to covering the subsequent Zack interlude segments, we'll get some answers. But until then, we'll just have to keep it in our mental auditory Rolodex as we continue our unknown journey across FF7 Rebirth. Okay, let's jump in. The morning after the events of Chapter 1, Cloud leaves the inn and is greeted by the bright morning and our first track of Chapter 2. This is a brief track that plays as Red 13 thanks you for your help back in Remake, as he formally joins your party. Tonally and melodically, this is pretty clearly a playful Shotaro Shima arrangement. Compare the strings here to the section in the interlude of Zack dragging Cloud into Midgar. It's also obviously riffing on the original FF7 town theme, On Our Way. It never fully lands on Our Way, functioning literally as an intro to the next track, which seamlessly starts right as the cutscene ends. This is a lovely arrangement of On Our Way. It's about 10 beats per minute faster than the original, giving it a slightly less sleepy feel, but the overall lackadaisical tone of the original is still present. The brass and woodwinds fit the rustic, canal-divided streets of an old European city. This is embellished in Rebirth, but the medieval aesthetic was there in the original as well. Calm feels a bit like a tribute to the old medieval towns of the earlier 8 and 16-bit era Final Fantasies, and the cozy feel of On Our Way matches the style perfectly. Once the accordion kicks in, I get major flashbacks of being completely turned around while trying to navigate the many canals of Final Fantasy XV's Alticia. But maybe that's just me. Speaking of accordions, as Cloud approaches a group of dancers near the canal, you can make out another diegetic track coming from the nearby boombox. The folks are giving it their all while this, let's call it stereotypically Dutch sounding folk song plays. It doesn't have any recurring FF7 themes, as far as I can tell, which seems like a real missed opportunity. I loved how the diegetic jukebox tracks from Remake were a chance for the arrangers to flex their musical muscles, with more out-there genres and styles using familiar FF7 tunes. I don't know, maybe it's foreshadowing a new theme that shows up later. It's not great. Let's keep moving. Speaking of diegetic tracks, if you played Final Fantasy VII Remake with Japanese voices selected, you'll recognize this remake tune as you approach the small sheltered stage deeper into town. An instrumental version of Akira's classic hit, Midgar Blues, is playing from the boombox next to his promoter dad. Specifically, it's the Japanese version from Remake, but with Akira's voice track taken out so that it works with whichever language you have your game set to in Rebirth. There were a lot of vocal tracks in Remake and its DLC, and the vast majority of them had an English version and a Japanese version, but occasionally it wasn't just the vocal track that was substituted. They often straight up wrote two completely different songs for the same moment in the game. The Japanese version of Midgar Blues, for example, has a post-war Enka ballad feel, but if you played Remake in English, the whole track sounds more like a Wish.com version of Sufjan Stevens. If there are new vocal tracks in Rebirth, which feels like a given, I'll be curious to see if they continue to multiply their workload like this. Anyhow, unfortunately, Akira isn't here yet to put on a show, so I guess we'll just have to come back later to catch his set. Next up, we have a big one. Like Cloud, I am frequently tempted to abandon my quest of pursuing Sephiroth, and instead giving it all up to play some Queen's Blood, the new card game taking the world of Rebirth by storm. Yes, the card game is fantastic, but even fantasticer is its theme song, Queen's Blood. There's so much to celebrate here. As you'll soon see in the next few tracks, this big jazzy number is our first new Rebirth leitmotif. It was composed by Mitsuto Suzuki and Junnosuke Usui. Mitsuto Suzuki is one of only two composers and arrangers listed in the opening credits of both Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, along with his twin star Masashi Hamauzu. Suzuki is one of my favorite composers in the industry. He's been an in-house composer and arranger at Square Enix since the mid-2000s, at the beginning working on lesser-known titles until he got his big break on the Final Fantasy XIII trilogy. For the first part of the trilogy, his involvement was limited to arranging 10 or so tracks, including Hanging Edge, the very best opening area theme in any Final Fantasy since, well, opening bombing mission in Final Fantasy VII. But at this point he was relegated to Shima status, aka unknown to all but the perverts that actually read the liner notes of the original soundtrack releases. It isn't until Final Fantasy XIII-2 and Lightning Returns that Suzuki's name begins to make a wider splash. Here he shares the spotlight with the other two composers, and just like that, the definition of what Final Fantasy music can be became infinitely wider. love his complete lack of fear at raising eyebrows. I know a lot of folks weren't thrilled with some of the quirkier tracks in Remake and Rebirth, most of which he had a major hand in. But to me, so much of Remake and Rebirth's soul is in those moments. Remake without Run Run Run, without Midnight Rendezvous, Collapsed Expressway, without Stand Up, without Stamp, without the goddamn Runaround, is a drier, way less memorable experience. Anyway, all to say Suzuki owns. He is listed as co-composer of the Queen's Blood theme along with the track's arranger, Junosuke Usui, whom I would love to go over his storied legacy and rise to fame, but unfortunately we're still in the early days for Usui. This, however, is an incredibly promising start. Usui is a young, recent hire at Square Enix. Working primarily as a sound designer at first, he's given a single track to compose and arrange in 2022's Harvestella, where his background as a trained musician becomes suddenly much more apparent. Rebirth is easily his biggest project yet, and while he is mostly relegated to lower stakes music for mini-games such as Queen's Blood and Chocobo Racing, his work here is uniformly excellent. His arrangements, especially the big band jazzy numbers, are as rich as anyone else's on the team. I'm really impressed. While Usui is listed as a co-composer on Queen's Blood, I think the actual Queen's Blood leitmotif, is just a Suzuki composition, and Usui is getting a writer's credit because of the track's intro. While you are selecting your cards, the track plays a unique, slower-paced piano section that loops indefinitely, patiently waiting for you to decide on your starting hand. This is, I think, the Usui composition. Once you lock in your choices, the brass and drums immediately kick in, leading to the main section. Also, if ever your opponent's score is higher than yours, I know, what a concept, the music very cruelly removes the main brass melody line, leaving behind the drums, backing piano, strings, and the occasional accented brass. It's a fun, more subtle use of dynamic music than we're used to, a bit like the arrangement shift when entering various homes during the Nibelheim flashback. At the end of the match, if you win, you get the short Queen's Blood Victory, arranged by Kengo Tokusashi. Kengo Tokusashi often acts as Mitsuto Suzuki's right-hand man. Rare is the game where both aren't credited together at least once. The brass here doesn't sound as strong nor as realistic as in Junosuke Usui's Queen's Blood track, but it's a short piece and the focus is primarily on the piano anyway. If you lose, you get a cool, phasery electric piano version of the Queen's Blood theme right out of the mid-70s. I'm guessing this is Tokusashi as well, but we'll just have to wait and see. Once you've spent enough time getting lost in calm, it's time to meet up with Aerith at the clock tower. A very gentle piano track starts up. Note the kinda corny major key version of the FF7 main theme on the violins in the intro. And it's done. Things then take a sudden turn for the worse. As Cloud and Aerith spot some Shinra Gelnikas approaching the town, we get a new high-octane track, most likely arranged by Yoshinori Nakamura. There's a few reasons why I think it's him, but the most telling is the near-identical stinger sound that opens both this track and FF7 Remake's S76 Annex Diversion. That and the more percussive and synth-heavy cinematic style are more reflective of his usual sound. The track has a few other similarities to S76 Annex Diversion, such as the less common 7/4 time signature, and also the way it presents itself as a seemingly new musical idea before subtly throwing in existing FF7 motifs, such as the Shinra Inc. motif right here. The heroic groove of the track gets markedly murkier as the innkeeper Brodin shows up, where you can better hear Nakamura's collection of fat modular synths. As gameplay resumes, the mix gets more heroic and orchestral. If there is one new melody line to take away from this track, it's probably this one. Once you hit an impasse, Brodin tells you to make use of the stupefyingly convenient network of scaffolding in the rooftops to get past the blockade. Climbing up to it causes the track to change once more, with its intensity subbed out for something cooler and more subdued. There's more of an R&B or hip-hop style to the production here, which also lines up with Yoshinori Nakamura, who, outside of his work with Square Enix, shadows as an eclectic R&B producer under the name Noli Stark. You can hear some of his broader influences throughout his work in Remake and Rebirth, such as in this track. I really like the clock-ticking rhythm track to drive home the sense of urgency. Once the group shelters at the inn, it triggers a more relaxed coda. That, or it's the start of a seamless new track, but for simplicity's sake, I'm gonna go with coda. There's a sparse marching drum, an airy synth running through a harsh tremolo playing a more relaxed chord progression. Some strings and an electric guitar. Things have calmed down now that we've found a bit of shelter, and the more unsettled 7/4 time signature returns to a simpler 4/4 pattern. The cutscene ends and the track loops. Cloud and Co. head downstairs and make their way towards Calm's secret exit and to the vast open world beyond. And that's where we'll leave things for today. 9 more tracks, our first new recurring leitmotif, and the introduction of several more key members of the Rebirth sound team. That's big progress. If I've mathed things out properly, it should take me 5 episodes total to cover Chapter 2. So 4 more to go. See you then. Bye.